Hello and welcome to Cafetography.co.uk. Today we're looking at Canon's most expensive 50mm lens, the 50mm f1.2 USM-L. It's a versatile lens that lets in a huge amount of light, so it's great for indoor or event photography, which is why it's a popular lens with professional wedding photographers. A maximum aperture of f1.2 can let in plenty of light for photography at night time or any other dark place, and another major advantage is that it can give you an extremely out-of-focus background. This is potentially an extremely creative and fun lens to use. The build quality of this lens is on a very professional level. It's quite big and heavy for a 50mm lens, but it feels very solid and durable. As you can see, the big glass front element is particularly good looking. The lens is weather sealed, as you can see by the gasket on the rear mount, so that means it should have better protection against dust and water than other lenses do, especially if you put a filter on the front. The focus ring turns very smoothly and it's very well damped. The lens has full-time manual focusing, so you can turn that focus ring whether or not the lens is set to autofocus. The autofocus motor isn't incredibly fast, probably because the lens has to move such heavy pieces of glass. However, it works silently and accurately. Let's look at the lens's image quality. We'll start by testing it on a full-frame camera, a 20-megapixel Canon 6D. In the middle of the image, there's a decent level of sharpness, and colours and contrast are comparatively good. However, there is a bit of a problem with purple fringing, as you can see on the edges of the window frames, which spoils the party a little. Let's look in the corners. It's quite soft, and there's a little chromatic aberration, and the purple fringing remains, as well as a little ghosting on the edges of the windows. So thankfully there is some sharpness to be found, but the image quality isn't particularly impressive. If you stop down to f2, then the picture is a little sharper and overall much cleaner. There's a lot more contrast and a lot of the chromatic aberration has finally cleared up. f2.8 is even better, and the picture quality in the corners is finally fantastic when you stop down to f4. And of course, the image looks even better in the middle. Overall, on full-frame cameras, we get image quality that's acceptable at f1.2 and great when you stop the lens down. Well, most people use cameras with an APS-C sensor because they're far less expensive than full-frame. Let's take a look at the image quality on an APS-C camera, in this case, an 18-megapixel Canon 6DD. With the aperture wide open at f1.2, in the middle of the image, the lens isn't particularly sharp, and the problems with purple fringing are even more obvious. However, the colours and contrast are still pretty good, which is good to see on a lens with such a wide aperture. If we look in the corners, the sharpness levels are only slightly lower, but there's still a lot of chromatic aberration or annoying colours on contrasting edges. Let's top the lens down to f2. The corners become sharper and better defined with better contrast. The colourful aberrations are still there. However, if we look back in the middle of the image, the lens is fairly sharp and the picture looks good. Stop the lens down to f2.8 and it looks even better, and the corners are getting better too. At f4 and f5.6, the lens is sharp in the corners, although sadly the chromatic aberration never quite goes away. Picture quality in the middle is great. So we can see that the lens performs far better on full-frame cameras than it does on APS-C, although you can still get some great images. But sharpness isn't everything. Let's look at some other optical issues. When we look at our distortion chart, we can see that the lens has noticeable barrel distortion, and at f1.2 there's strong vignetting or darkness in the corners. If you stop the lens down to f2.8, the vignetting is more or less gone. The lens can focus down to 45 centimeters, so it's not really designed for macro work, although this is close enough for lots of uses. The close-up image quality is quite poor at f1.2, but if you stop down to f2, the image gets a lot sharper. As you can see in this video footage, the lens manages to work fairly well against bright lights, unless you point it directly into the sun, which isn't a great idea anyway. That's probably one of the reasons its colours and contrast are always so good. But for a lot of people, the most important thing will be the quality of this lens's bokeh, or the out-of-focus highlights. There's some really good news. The 50mm f1.2 manages to give softer, smoother backgrounds than other 50mm lenses. The out-of-focus areas almost always look natural and buttery. That's absolutely critical for a lens like this, which lives or dies by its narrow depth of field work. So, the Canon 50mm f1.2 is somewhat of an enigma. It may have great build quality, but technically it doesn't have the best image quality in the world. It isn't quite as sharp as you'd hope it would be, and it has some distortion and vignetting problems. But picture quality is about more than sharpness. Despite any problems, the pictures this lens can give you are stunning. The maximum aperture of f1.2, combined with strong colours and contrast and smooth bokeh, mean that this lens makes your pictures really jump out. The very high price means that only professionals will probably want to buy this lens. But if you wanted a nice lens to use for a wedding or another big event, then a perfect solution would be to rent this lens out for a few days. Undoubtedly, this lens could get incredible pictures for you. It's well worth a try.